Hello, everyone. We are so glad you're here with us. If you enjoy this episode, please rate, review, and share it so that we can reach more ECEs and childcare workers. My name is Rachel Neville, and I will be your host today. On today's episode, I have some very interesting 10-a-day updates to share with you all. Last week, the last week of January 2026, the provinces and territories met to discuss the 10-a-day program in Canada. Ahead of this meeting, we signed on to Childcare Now's letter to emphasize the importance of the continued funding of the program. We also wrote our own letter to Paul Calandra on the upcoming Federal Provincial Territorial Forum of Ministers most responsible for early learning and childcare. I'll now share with you all what that letter said. Dear Minister Calandra, today I am writing to you on behalf of the Association of Early Childhood Educators Ontario, the professional association for registered early childhood educators in Ontario for over 75 years. This letter comes to you in advance of the Federal Provincial Territorial Forum of Ministers most responsible for early learning and childcare on Friday, January 30th, 2026, to urge you to continue, strengthen, and expand the 10-a-day childcare system here in Ontario through the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Agreement, also known as CEWALC. At a time when it feels as though every possible living expense is rising, the CEWALC program and decreased childcare fees in Ontario have been a lifeline for families and have provided significant economic return to the province. Parents are able to rely on affordable, accessible, high-quality care for their children. Children have a safe and caring place to learn through play. Our families, communities, and economy have all benefited from the implementation of the 10-a-day program. Early childhood educators are the beating heart of this system. They provide developmentally appropriate education and care to Ontario's youngest citizens. As a female-dominated workforce providing work based in the care of others, ECEs have historically been neglected, undervalued, and disrespected. The CEWALC program has provided an opportunity to mitigate this. With the implementation of the first wage floor for RECEs and its subsequent increases, many RECEs have seen wage increases of up to $5 per hour. While there is still much work to do to address the retention crisis in the field by providing decent work and pay to all childcare employees, we cannot give up what we have gained through this program. Expansion and increased access depend on it. Much remains to be done to ensure this life-changing program meets its initial objectives and true potential. The AECEO is a signatory on a letter organized by Childcare Now and signed by all major childcare associations across Canada, as well as by every Federation of Labour and other important partners. This letter calls on all governments to strengthen the CEWALC program by doing the following. Increasing public funding to meet the real cost of operating high-quality programs and to expand the availability of licensed childcare under the 10-a-day childcare system. Building a primarily nonprofit and public system of childcare so that public investments advance high-quality, equitable service, not profit-making. Achieving a maximum parent fee of $10 a day with further fee reductions for low-income families. Investing in early learning in the childcare workforce to attract and retain qualified educators. Developing and implementing concrete, proactive childcare expansion plans with emphasis on making access more equitable. Publicly and promptly sharing the text of your childcare agreements, associated action plans, and results. It is necessary that both the provincial and federal governments work together to expand and strengthen the 10-a-day childcare program. Increased investment in the early years workforce, including a pay equity compliant wage grid, will be critical to the success of the program and necessary to ensure that all families have access to high quality early learning and childcare. Childcare that has already transformed and benefited Ontario. We urge our provincial government to commit to collaborating with our federal partners, increase its own investment in early learning and childcare, and to sign a new 5-year CEWALC agreement as soon as possible. Sincerely, Amber Straker, RECE, Executive Director of the AECEO. So, as you can probably see from our letter, we emphasized all the important, massive, life-changing things that the 10-a-day program has brought and encouraged the federal and provincial governments to continue collaborating to make the 10-a-day program expand and be supportive for children, families, and ECEs. So recently, we have also collaborated with the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare to write another pre-budget submission to the provincial government outlining our vision for childcare in Ontario. So this letter comes ahead of the Ontario budget, and the idea is for it to make recommendations and emphasize the things that we think should be prioritized in this budget related to childcare. And I will read this letter as well. So this submission was called the 2026 Ontario Pre-Budget Submission from the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare and the Association of Early Childhood Educators of Ontario. The first section is called Federal Spending on ELCC is benefiting Ontario families and the economy, but gaps remain, and it's time for Ontario to step up its contribution. The CWEL program has been life-changing for Ontario families. Thanks to substantial new federal investment of over $13 billion since 2022, the federal-provincial collaboration, average childcare fees in Ontario have dropped sharply, providing much-needed financial relief to hundreds of thousands of Ontario families. With Ontario's move to $22 a day childcare in January 2025, Toronto parents are saving $1,389 a month on average on infant childcare compared to 2019. In Mississauga, Richmond Hill, Brampton, and Vaughan, the 2025 savings were approximately $1,000 a month for an infant space. In most other locations in Ontario, savings were well over $500 a month. However, fee reductions are now stalled and will not meet the target of an average of 10 a day in March 2026 as promised. CWEL has also funded wage improvements for some registered early childhood educators, RECs, who now have a wage floor of $25.86. While this modest improvement was direly needed, it falls far short of making childcare wages competitive, fails to comply with the Pay Equity Act, and is well behind other provinces and territories that have introduced wage grids, benefits, and pension plans. There has also been modest expansion of spaces thanks to CWEL, although access still falls far short of meeting demand in Ontario. The Auditor General of Ontario has reported that only 75% of promised childcare spaces have been created. Despite these challenges, and although the program is still in its infancy, the CWEL program has already led to important economic benefits across Canada. A 2024 economic analysis found the following. New jobs in the ELCC sector make it the sixth largest source of new employment in Canada since CWEL started. Female labor supply has increased in line with expected ELCC services through two channels: improved labor force participation and more full-time work. Combined, this has increased female core age 25 to 54 years, labor supply by 175,000 full-time equivalents. The combination of increased ELCC activity, expanded spin-off work in upstream supply chains and downstream consumer industries, and enhanced female employment has raised Canada's national GDP by $32 billion, or over 1%, since 2019. The new GDP, supported directly and indirectly by expanded ELCC services, prevented Canada from entering a technical recession in the second half of 2023. These benefits are felt in Ontario, where over 300,000 Ontario families are benefiting from more affordable childcare. The Ontario government also benefits from these savings to families through job creation, female labor force participation, and families spending money in their local economies. In addition, since the introduction of CWEL's fee reductions, the Ontario government has been saving between $100 and $200 million each year on its own care tax credit spending, as parents are claiming less for childcare expenses. Yet, as federal contributions have grown, the Ontario government's childcare funding has virtually flatlined. Ontario's childcare allocations, including local priorities funding that supports inclusion of children with disabilities in childcare, have not even been indexed to inflation, let alone increased to meet the needs of a growing sector. Ontario has not reinvested its care tax credit savings into bolstering the childcare system. Although childcare has historically been a provincial responsibility, research from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives shows that the federal contributions to ELCC started eclipsing provincial spending in 2022-2023 and now stands at more than 56% of federal contribution versus 44% provincial contribution. Ontario's CWELC spending agreement with the federal government is set to expire in December 2026. It is important that Ontario renews this agreement. While there is certainly room for federal government to increase its funding, given the benefits to Ontario families and Ontario's economy, the Ontario government should pay its fair share, boosting its contribution to CWELC by at least $500 million to match federal investments. If both governments commit to long-term collaboration and full sustained funding of the system, the Ontario childcare sector could ensure that CWELC is strengthened and expanded to do the following: reach full affordability targets, solve the childcare workforce shortage with decent work and pay, and serve all families in a universal program. The next section is called Following the Roadmap to Universal Childcare in Ontario. In September 2025, the OCBCC and the AECEO released the second edition of our Roadmap to Universal Childcare in Ontario. Created in consultation with our members, partners, and allies, the roadmap sets out a hopeful vision of an early learning and childcare system with affordable fees, decent work and pay for educators, and access for all, and recommends policy interventions to make that vision a reality. The roadmap lays out policy interventions that Ontario should make to address ELCC system building, funding, affordability, workforce, and expansion, and to move Ontario to a more affordable and equitable childcare system. I'll share a link to the roadmap in the show notes of this episode, so you can take a look at a really awesome graphic which summarizes the roadmap's 21 policy interventions. The next section is called The ELCC Workforce is Critical to Success. While all aspects of ELCC system building are important, it is crucial right now to understand the need for investment in the ELCC workforce, given the critical shortage of RECEs and childcare workers. Many RECEs are leaving the field due to a lack of appropriate pay and working conditions. Many educators, predominantly women, are being forced to make difficult decisions about whether to continue in the field they love or leave for a job with higher wages that includes health benefits and a pension plan. The Auditor General of Ontario estimates that Ontario will be short 10,000 RECEs by the end of 2026 to meet the expansion goals of the CWELC program. Without an attractive, competitive wage that keeps staff in their positions, we cannot hope to expand affordable childcare programs in Ontario. The impact of the current shortage is that many childcare centres are not at capacity because they cannot staff existing spaces. Centres have rooms closed because they cannot retain RECEs. We cannot hope to expand the program if we're not able to staff the spaces currently available. As the workforce crisis has grown, the number of RECEs working in childcare has decreased from 59% in 2022 to 56% in 2025. In the last 5 years, the number of director approvals or unqualified staff working in RECE positions has increased from 159 to 1,997 across the province, further demonstrating the need to address wages and working conditions and ensure that pathways to acquiring and upgrading qualifications are made available. RECs and other childcare staff need a pay equity compliant early years and childcare wage grid, including the following: at least $35 to $45 per hour for RECs, at least $28 per hour for non-RECE staff. Pensions and benefit plans. The final section of our pre-budget submission is called Supporting All Parts of the ELCC Sector. The OCBCC and the AECEO supports the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres, OFIFC, pre-budget recommendation on ELCE calling for $1.3 million annually administered through the OFIFC to implement their approach to the delivery of Indigenous early learning and childcare through friendship centres. This will help meet the demand for at least 13,000 childcare spaces within urban Indigenous communities. The workforce crisis in early years and childcare are not limited to Seawalk. RECEs working in early-ons, authorized recreation, and other settings, as well as RECE special needs resource consultants, have been left behind in the creation of the wage floor for RECEs in Seawalk. Just as during the implementation of full-day kindergarten, RECEs left childcare to work for employment in school boards, where jobs were unionized and typically included health benefits, now RECEs in early-ons are leaving family support for higher wages available in Seawalk-funded childcare. Ontario must ensure wage parity across the broader early years and childcare sector for work of equal value with equal requirements and registration with the College of ECE. In summary, Ontario must work collaboratively with the federal government to strengthen and expand the Canada-wide early learning and childcare system, and Ontario must invest to ensure that the broader early years and childcare system, from early-ons to school-age childcare, can support all Ontario families. It's time to value and fund early learning and childcare for all. Signed, Carolyn Ferns, Policy Coordinator at the OCBCC, and Amber Straker, Executive Director of the AECEO. So, we have been hard at work making sure that our policy recommendations are being heard by all levels of government. If you're a member of the AECEO, we have a members meeting coming up on February 5th at 7 p.m. We really hope that you'll join us. We'll be diving into more policy updates and doing a little Q&A. It's a wonderful space where folks can come together and share how they're experiencing policy in their own work and let us know what more we can be doing to support you. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode, and if you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to write into us. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider becoming a member. The link to join us will be in the episode description. Your membership makes a difference in the lives of ECEs and childcare workers, children and families, and allows us to continue doing this work. To all the members currently supporting us, thank you so much. To all the ECEs and childcare workers listening, you are so important and deserve to feel special and valued and to be compensated well for your work.